What we're looking at here is a Ukrainian paratrooper using a Javelin to destroy a Russian tank in the town of Novomykhailivka. This is probably the world's best anti-tank missile, and it was the very first weapon that America supplied to Ukraine before Russia's full-scale invasion. The Ukrainians love it so much, they've even turned it into a saint. So what makes the Javelin so effective, and does it have any weaknesses? We're going to break down exactly how the weapon works, examine this footage, and speak to an expert to find out. A Javelin is made up of three parts. First, you've got the Command Launch Unit, or CLU, which is this thing the paratrooper is holding in front of his face. Then you've got the Launch Tube Assembly, or LTA, which is this bit he's got slung over his shoulder. Finally, you've got the Javelin missile itself, which pops out of the tube here before flying off and blowing a Russian tank to bits. Let's take a closer look. The CLU is how the soldier controls the Javelin. On the front, you've got this big night vision scope, which gives the gunner an infrared view of the battlefield. This is the main way he's going to aim the Javelin, whether at night or in the day, because it cuts through things like smoke, fog and rain, and of course, it can see in the dark. Right next to the night vision sight is a cooling system, and just above that is the day sight, which serves as a backup for when the night vision is out of battery. Here you've got absorbers made of a fancy styrofoam material, which protect the sights while keeping the weight of the system down. On the other side, you've got hand grips for the gunner with control buttons at the top. On the left is a filter button which acts as a defense against lasers which can blind the user. In the middle is a toggle used to focus the sights, and on the right is a sight select button which switches between different zooms and seeker mode, which activates the seeker trigger. The trigger itself is down here, and when the gunner squeezes it, it locks on to whatever he is aiming at. There is a guard to stop him pulling it by accident. Over here is a power switch which has 4 modes: off, day, night and test. On the right hand grip, there's a button that allows the gunner to swap between top attack and direct attack mode, which we'll explain more in just a minute. Here's another toggle switch that allows him to adjust the brightness and contrast of the night vision scope. And here is the fire trigger. This activates only when the Javelin is locked on, and pulling it fires the missile. If we go back to the video, we can see all of that in action. The gunner is focusing his lenses here before pulling the left trigger to lock on. Once he's got a lock, he pulls the right trigger to fire the missile. This is what that same process looks like from the gunner's point of view, through the eyepiece. Around the edge of the screen are a bunch of indicators telling him what's going on. These symbols show what sight he's selected: day, wide field of vision, narrow field of vision, and seeker mode. Down the right, you've got top attack and direct attack, and filter, which lights up when the filter button is pressed. On the left and along the bottom are a bunch of warning lights like low battery, there's a problem with the missile, or the night vision is overheating. In the middle is what the camera sees, and this is how the gunner aims. Once they've found a target using the various zooms and modes, they flip over to seeker mode, which brings up this little box which they use to frame the target. Pulling the seeker trigger brings up some flashing crosshairs which turn solid when the Javelin is locked on and ready to fire. Once it is locked on, the fire trigger activates and one pull sends the missile on its way. We went to film a Javelin crew training. Here's what that looks like in real life. The gunner is tracking the target, he's pulling the left trigger to lock on, and then he's firing the missile with the right trigger. Next, we've got the LTA, which is a pretty simple piece of kit. Mostly, it protects the missile while being carried and stabilizes it for launch. It has a carrying handle here, a shoulder strap here, and end caps made from more high-tech styrofoam here and here. Up here, there's a bunch of connectors which lock it into place on the CLU, and a battery and cooling system for the missile. And here's a pad which rests against the gunner's shoulder. The CLU is simple because it's disposable. Once the missile has been fired, the whole thing is chucked away. Here I've got a piece of tape from the US that shows you exactly how that works. You can see Marines carrying the LTA here, clipping it to the CLU here, and going to dispose of the tube after firing. There's three sections of a Javelin missile: the guidance section up front, propulsion section at the back, and the warhead section in the middle. Right at the tip is an infrared camera, which allows the missile to guide itself after it is fired. Just behind the camera is a guidance system, which keeps the camera pointing at the target and controls the propulsion at the back. The propulsion consists of two motors, one for launching the missile, another for powering it in flight, and pop-out fins. The launch motor is the less powerful of the two, and it is responsible for getting the missile out of the launch tube. As the missile leaves the tube, the rear fins pop out. The guidance system can rotate these in the air to change the direction of flight. There's also a second set of fins which pop out in the middle of the missile, but these don't move. They're just there to keep it stable. Once the missile is in the air, the more powerful flight motor ignites. What does all of that mean? Well, it means the Javelin has a small backblast, the amount of flame and force that comes out the back of the tube when it is fired. That means it can be fired from inside a building if needs be. The large motor then has enough fuel to carry the Javelin at least 1.5 miles or up to 2.5 miles in the right conditions. And once the Javelin is in the air, it can guide itself to its target with no further input from the gunner. This is called fire and forget. It means that as soon as the trigger is pulled, the gunner can run for cover to avoid being seen and shot by the enemy. You can see all of that in the video. The launch motor fires here, the fins pop out here and here, and the main motor kicks in here. But what happens next is what makes the Javelin really special. Instead of flying straight at its target like most other anti-tank missiles, you can see it goes up in the air and then comes crashing back down. This is called top attack mode. Instead of flying in a straight line, the Javelin flies in an arc, which is where it gets its name, after an Olympic javelin. This is because most tanks have their toughest armor on the front and sides, where other tanks are likely to be shooting at them from. But the top armor is relatively weak and easy to penetrate, which is what the Javelin is aiming for. Almost always, the Javelin will be fired in top attack mode because that gives it the best chance of a kill. Direct attack, where the Javelin flies straight, is useful only when shooting at a target under cover or above the gunner, like at a helicopter. When the Javelin reaches its target, it has one more trick up its sleeve to guarantee a kill: a tandem warhead which is contained in the midsection of the missile. This is exactly what it sounds like. Two explosives instead of one, which are designed to overcome explosive reactive armor, or ERA. ERA works by exploding outwards as it is hit, forcing the blast of an incoming missile away from the tank. The Javelin's warhead overcomes this because a small charge explodes first and sets off the ERA, before a second, larger charge detonates and punches clean through the tank armor, which is now unprotected. You can see how the Javelin rises up into the air, then starts coming back down on its target. And boom, the tandem warheads punch straight through the armor. One less Russian tank to worry about. Javelins were among the first weapons America supplied to Ukraine as Russia's army was massing on the border to invade. It was meant to send a signal to Putin: don't do it. America will help the Ukrainians resist by giving them weapons to kill you with if necessary. The Javelin was chosen because large numbers could be supplied very quickly. Hundreds were flown to Kiev in just a few days, and it is very easy to use. Normally, training takes 1 week. In Ukraine, troops were given a 2-day crash course. That was important because at the time, nobody knew exactly when Putin would attack. As we've seen, they are specially designed to make a mess of tanks which the Russian army relies upon very heavily. In fact, before the Ukraine war kicked off, it had more of them in its army than any other country in the world. To win the war, Ukraine was going to have to destroy a lot of tanks very quickly, and the Javelin was the perfect tool for the job. The Russian tank crews appeared to get the message loud and clear. Big metal cages soon started appearing on top of their turrets, designed to thwart the Javelin's signature top-down attack mode. But the message didn't get through to Putin, who soon ordered his troops across the border with disastrous results. As the Ukrainians fought back, dozens of videos spread online showing the Javelins doing exactly what they were designed to do with deadly precision, and documenting the ineffectiveness of Russia's so-called cope cages. The Javelin quickly became a symbol of both Ukraine's defiance and its links with the West's, inspiring this image, Saint Javelin. But Javelins aren't perfect. They are expensive and tricky to produce. A single missile costs upwards of $130,000, and even the vast US military-industrial complex only churns out around 2,000 of them per year. That is nowhere near enough for Ukraine, which is destroying an estimated 3,200 tanks per year and counting. So, does the Javelin really live up to its billing as the world's best anti-tank missile?
We're here at an undisclosed location somewhere in the south of England with this, the Javelin anti-tank missile launcher. We're here to see how it works.
We were lucky enough to see the Javelin during a live fire exercise and captured the whole thing in slow motion so you can see in full detail what we're talking about. Here's a Javelin crew on the firing range preparing to launch. Most of the Javelin and the soldier firing it are hidden underneath this camo netting, but you can see the end of the LTA poking out here. The Javelin is resting on a tripod for stability and the gunner is sitting down. If we swap tapes for just a moment, you can see what that setup looks like. Here's the tripod. Here's the gunner with the CLU and LTA already clicked together. And here he is getting into the firing position. That thing you just saw them throw away was the protective end cap from the front end of the LTA. It needs to be removed before the Javelin can fire. If we go back to the first video and slow it right down, we can see the firing take place. The smaller motor fires first, launching the Javelin out of the LTA and into the air. You can see the central and tail fins pop out here. Then the second motor fires here, powering the missile towards its target. From this point on, the missile will control itself with no further input from the gunner. If we change angles, we can see that again. Here's the gunner, and here's where that first video was being filmed from. Once again, you can see the starter motor firing here, launching the Javelin out of the LTA, and the main motor firing here. This Javelin has been fired in top attack mode, so it starts rapidly rising into the air. And in a moment, it's going to pivot around and come crashing back down onto this target. Here it comes. You can see how fast it's moving if you compare it to this flock of birds. The whole thing happens in half a wing beat. If we go frame by frame, you can even see the Tandem warhead detonate. There's a small flash here before the main explosive charge goes off a millisecond later here. You can see how much more powerful that second explosion is. Large enough to tear through a Russian tank and detonate the ammo inside. Just so you know, here's what that whole attack looked like at full speed. Next, we spoke to the British instructors training their fellow soldiers about what makes the Javelin so unique.
So one of the things that makes Javelin as deadly as it is its ability to do top attack, which is where it will leave the round. You can fire a minimum of distance of 150 meters, but out to 2.5 K or 2,500 meters. And once the missile's released on top attack, it will fly up to an altitude of about 150 meters, stay there, and then, as indicated by the name, come down right on top of the armor through sort of one of the weakest points to ensure that it does its job.
It's a deadly weapon, but it's also completely portable. So let's get a closer look at all its elements.
Javelin as a weapon system itself is split into three parts. First being the tripod, which is obviously the legs at the bottom. You've then got the clue or the command launch unit, which is the sight and the weapon system itself. And then you've got the ammunition essentially, which is the large green missile you can see on the top, which is the LTA or the launch tube assembly. Those are the three parts. It's fully man portable, can be used by one person and usually carried in teams of two though, just to make the burden of the weight and things a little bit easier.
How much does it weigh?
So each bit, so the important bits I suppose, so each missile weighs 16 kilos and then two people will usually carry one each. So that's 16 kilos each just on one missile before you even touch all their personal kit and everything. And then the clue itself with a battery fitted is 7 kilo. So
Okay,
yeah,
a fair old yom.
that's base, yeah, and yeah, batteries, and then batteries last 4 hours, and then depending on your mission, you're ramping up from there. But yeah, in terms of kit and equipment, you can see on the front of the Clue. So see the main piece you can see is the night vision sight on the front of the system, which is what we use to use thermal. That'll do on wide field of view, 4 times zoom, and then on narrow field of view we can zoom in up to 12 times. To allow us to sort of gain targets, acquisitions, or find and that sort of thing. As well as being able to use it by thermal, obviously we can use it by day as well. So we've got the day sight, which is 4 times zoom, and then we've got the day sight extender as well, which just slits in as slots on the front should we need to get a bit more range by the day. The Clue doesn't need to be on to use any of the day capabilities, so you can just have it off to save battery throughout the day.
And other features I can see on the front. What's this thing here?
So that's the DDC, which stands for Detector Dewar Cooler, which essentially allows the night sight itself to function. So the reason it's got all these fins, it's to dissipate heat. So as the weapon system creates heat, as the sight cools down, it essentially regulates the temperature to allow the sight to function correctly.
The Javelin also has a tandem warhead.
It's got a precursor charge built into it. This is designed to set off any explosive reactive armor that enemy armor might have on it, which is becoming increasingly common these days. So it's got that capability built into it, and then that allows the main charge itself to do its job and take out the enemy. Explosive reactive armor is a type of defensive aid suite that enemy vehicles sometimes use in order to upgrade their survivability of their armor. It's basically 2 plates wedged together with some form of explosive in the middle that would be set off by whether another tank round, an RPG round, or anything like that. And it, without going into too much detail, puts the jet that these things make when they go off, it puts that off and stops it from penetrating the main armor, so that the crew and the tank itself is they're all okay. Obviously, Javelin stops that and allows us to ideally take a tank out in one shot.
What are the features of the missile?
So when you activate the seeker via the Clue when you're going to fire, you start looking via the Clue and round interface connectors, which are located in here. You start looking through the missile itself, and that's when you acquire lock and fire from there. So you actually drop off, if you're in narrow field of view in thermal with a 12 times, you drop onto a 9 times with the seeker, so it degrades slightly.
Let's take an even closer look.
Okay, fantastic. So now we're looking at the back end of the Javelin launcher. Do you want to talk us through what we can see here?
Yeah, so essentially what we've got here, which you couldn't see before, is the back of the Clue or command launch unit. So this is where the students and firers look through. As you push your eye on, that breaks open, so that if it's like that, none of the light from the camera's coming out. So as you push in, you'll be able to see. You've then got on here, it's called the adapter adjustment ring, that allows firers with different strength eyes, glasses, that sort of thing, to change it as you would the back of a set of binoculars, so that they can see through the Clue without too many issues. Just on here, you've got the round interface connector, which is where the round and the Clue talk to each other, and when you flick onto seeker to look through the seeker, that's how that works. They're all talking to each other through there. And then you've got essentially on here 2 triggers. On your left hand side, I'm doing this upside down, you've got the seeker, which has got a safety cover on it so that you don't activate the seeker accidentally. And yeah, that's a trigger you'll use to activate that. That's all that's for. Same as on the other side, you've got an uncovered trigger, which is the fire trigger. In order to fire the missile, you have to have both held down, so you can't do one without the other. So that's why only one of them is covered in safety. Beyond that, you've got a load of different functions on here. So this one is so across the top you've got a filter, which is essentially a filter that will flick into the Clue itself. There's a countermeasure that can be deployed, which fires a laser through the sight to try and blind the user, or just disable the Clue. The filter should stop that by filtering the laser out, so that the user is safe. You've then got essentially your focus, where you can push focus in and out. The Clue isn't auto-focusing like other things are, so that has to be done manually by the operator, and is an acquired skill gained through time, certainly. And then you've got attack select as well, where you can do flick between top attack and direct attack. Direct attack is essentially, as in the name, missiles straight out of the tube, and sort of more traditional flight. It's still fire and forget. So there's still no requirement once it's released. The missile does it all on its own. So the user can either extract out of danger before the enemy even knows what's happened, or he can track the target and then leave as he needs to. But yeah, direct attack we'd be using for things like helicopters, because you can engage helicopters with Javelin, or we'd be using for sort of targets under cover or in buildings or bunkers or things like that. So this is the battery compartment here. If you push down on this centre of this wire bale, it'll open up, and then those are the batteries in there. The clue's on at the moment, so I won't take that out. But yeah, those are the batteries in there. We do use two types. So whilst we're just training in the UK, we'll use rechargeable ones for obvious reasons. And then either for ranges like today, or if we're deployed on ops, or if we're just especially lucky, we'll get given the disposable lithium batteries, which are slightly lighter, which everyone likes, and also give us slightly better picture on the clue as well.
What are the steps the Javelin operator takes to acquire a target, and how does a standard operation unfold?
So firstly and most importantly is we need to identify that target is what we think it is, and we need to hit it. Javelin, once you fire it, you can't stop it or turn it off. So once the missile's away, you need to definitely make sure that you're firing at. So all of the gunners are trained, and it's something we cover quite heavily on the courses here, is AFV, so recognition of vehicles via sights and binoculars and things, so that the guys know what they're engaging is enemy armor. Once they've done that and they've been given the word of command to fire from their detachment commander, they'll activate the seeker, which is on one of the triggers on there, which we'll see shortly. That then gets the missile on the seeker activating. The seeker essentially inside here has a mini version of all of this, so it then has to go through its own process to cool down again. That can take up to 10 to 15 seconds whilst that happens, depending on how hot or cold it is. Once that's happening, you'll get seeker field of view up through the clue. And then you essentially, if you've seen sort of Top Gun and that sort of thing, where you see missile track gates coming in on planes and stuff like that, it's very similar. But it's all manually done by the gunners themselves. So they'll lock the track gates around the thermal signature of the piece of armour they want to engage. Once they're happy with it, they're happy that in front of the armour there's nothing that's going to stop the missile from striking the armour. They'll then achieve lock and fire the missile.
How easy is it to operate the Javelin in the field? With
training, it's easy to use and acquire. So clearly the ammunition is quite expensive, and it's not something we come across as often as we do other forms of ammunition. So to counter that, we've got something called the indoor trainer, which is essentially an electronic version of this. You can sit inside, you can go through the full engagement process and practice our gunners that way. And then when we're lucky enough, like today, to get ammunition to fire, the gunners are ready by that point. Then they need to have passed that test before they can fire live. It's certainly, when you first do it, definitely not easy. I say today the students covered, we were up at 0200 this morning, and they've covered about 14 kilometres with a few stands in between across the rolling scenery of Salisbury Plain, and everyone is here absolutely fine. So it's absolutely doable. It's completely man-portable as a weapon system. I've certainly carried it a long way in Kenya and hot climates, but it is heavy. The guys on course will probably carry anything up to 60-70 kilos sometimes if they're going to sort of follow Ps with batteries and everything that they need to sustain themselves for a duration as well. So it is heavy. It's part and parcel of anti-tanks, and we design our training programs to strengthen those muscle groups and things like that are particularly strained by carrying it. But yeah, definitely something you get used to, but not used to at the same time.
That's where this tape stops, but we'll be back soon to play you through another episode of War on Tape. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you want more videos like this in your feed, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.